The workshop smelled of sawdust and failure. Matthew Collins stood at his workbench in the thin December light, counting coins for the third time as if the number might change. It didn't. 47 cents stood between his 4 children and Christmas. Behind him, Emma and the younger ones huddled near the potbelly stove, their breath visible in the cold air beyond the fire's small circle of warmth. They pretended not to watch him count. Matthew's hands trembled as he pushed the coins into a pile. Papa Sarah, his youngest at 5, spoke barely above a whisper. "Will there be Christmas this year?" The silence stretched. Matthew's throat closed around words he couldn't form. Emma, 12 and too wise for her years, pulled Sarah close. "Hush now. Papa's working." But he wasn't working. He was standing in the ruins of what used to be a life. 2 years since the fever took his wife Sarah. 2 years of just surviving, taking whatever carpentry jobs paid enough to keep food on the table. The workshop that once rang with laughter now felt like a tomb. "Off to bed, all of you," Matthew said quietly. "School tomorrow." They obeyed without argument, filing past him with careful kisses on his weathered cheek. Emma lingered at the door. "It's all right, Papa. We understand." After she left, Matthew sagged against the bench. His hand found something in the shadows, a wooden horse, half-carved, covered in 2 years of dust. He'd started it for his son James before Sarah died, before everything stopped. His fingers traced the rough-hewn mane. He should finish it. He had the skill, the tools, the time. But his hands wouldn't move. Creating something beautiful required a part of him that had died with Sarah, buried under the weight of being both mother and father to 4 grieving children. The horse had no eyes yet, no tail, no joy. Matthew set it down carefully and blew out the candle. Through the workshop window, lamplight glowed from the storefront across the street, the place that had sat vacant for months. Someone was moving around inside at this late hour, unpacking crates from the look of it. He turned away. Whatever fresh start that stranger was making had nothing to do with him. Matthew locked the workshop and walked through the December cold to the small house where his children pretended to sleep. Another day survived. Another day without truly living. The wooden horse sat in the darkness, waiting. Margaret Sullivan's hands ached from the cold, but she kept working. The mechanical dancing bear needed to be visible from the street, its gears catching lamplight just so. She positioned it in the window and stepped back, studying the effect. Perfect. Around her, the newly rented shop bloomed with wooden wonders, dolls with painted porcelain faces, rocking horses with real horsehair manes, puzzle boxes that clicked open to reveal tiny treasures. 3 years of grief poured into creation, and now she'd brought it all west to Wyoming territory, fleeing Boston memories for frontier possibility. "Fresh start," Margaret whispered to the empty room. The words felt both like prayer and lie. Morning brought customers, curious townspeople examining her work with careful hands. Margaret answered questions about prices and craftsmanship, but her attention kept drifting to the window. Specifically, to the 4 children who'd appeared there like winter sparrows. They pressed their faces to the glass, breath fogging the pane. The eldest girl pointed at the dollhouse. The smallest boy's eyes went wide at the train set. They weren't touching, weren't asking, just looking with a hunger that made Margaret's chest tight. Then a man appeared behind them. Tall, lean, with carpenter's hands and shoulders bowed by invisible weight. He touched each child's shoulder gently. "Come on now," he said, voice low and kind. "Those aren't for us." The children's faces fell, but they obeyed without protest. The man met Margaret's eyes through the glass, tipping his worn hat with quiet dignity. An apology written in the gesture, sorry for the intrusion, sorry for the wanting, sorry for existing in a world where his children couldn't have beautiful things. Then he shepherded them away down the street. Margaret stood frozen at her counter. She'd seen poverty in Boston, seen fathers broken by circumstance, but something about this man's careful gentleness, the quality of his worn boots, The way those children loved him despite having nothing, it lodged in her heart like a splinter. Later, she learned from the mercantile owner. That's Matthew Collins. Good carpenter. Honest man. Lost his wife 2 years back. Does his best. But, the woman shrugged. 4 mouths to feed on frontier wages. He's a carpenter. Margaret picked up the half-finished toy soldier on her counter, studying its delicate joints. Best in town for detail work. But he only takes paying jobs now. Used to make beautiful things. I heard, not anymore. Margaret turned the toy soldier slowly. A carpenter with skilled hands and children who had no toys. A widower carrying grief visible in every careful movement. She knew that grief. Wore it herself, like a second skin. Does he do custom work? Margaret asked. I might need some shelving built. The mercantile owner smiled. I'll let him know you asked. Margaret returned to her shop as snow began to fall. Through the window. She watched the street where Matthew Collins had walked with his children. An idea took shape. Fragile as first snow, but growing stronger. Maybe she wasn't the only one who needed a fresh start. Matthew found Emma at his workbench the next morning, the wooden horse in her small hands. She looked up with eyes too old for 12. You should finish it. She said, for James. He'd love it. I know. Matthew took the horse gently, set it back in the shadows. Someday, Papa. Emma's voice carried that edge of exasperation children develop when adults are being foolish. Someday never comes if you keep saying it. Before Matthew could respond, boots crunched in the snow outside. The mercantile owner poked her head in, breath steaming. Matthew Collins. There's a woman needs carpentry work. The Toymaker. Just moved in across the way. Says she wants shelves built. You interested? Matthew's stomach tightened. Working in that shop, surrounded by toys his children would never own. Watching their hunger every time they passed the window. But the coins in his pocket weren't enough. Wouldn't be enough. Pride didn't feed children. I'll talk to her. Emma brightened. I'll tell the others you're working. It's just shelves. Emma. Don't. But she was already running toward the house. Hope in her steps. Matthew closed his eyes. Hope was dangerous. Hope made the falling hurt worse. Margaret Sullivan's shop smelled of fresh paint and pine. She looked up from arranging toys, and Matthew saw his own grief reflected in her eyes, the careful way widows held themselves, braced against the world's sharp edges. Mr. Collins. She extended her hand. Thank you for coming. Coffee. They sat at her work table, steam rising from tin cups. Matthew's hands, rough from labor, dwarfed the delicate cup. He felt enormous and clumsy in this space of beautiful, tiny things. I hear you build fine shelving. Margaret began. I can do that. Ma'am, just tell me what you need. Actually, I was hoping for something different. She set down her cup. I've been watching you work past my window. You're a carpenter. I'm a toy maker. I have designs but no woodworking skill. You have skill but... She gestured to his worn jacket. You need income. Matthew stiffened. I don't need charity. Good. I'm not offering it. Margaret's voice sharpened. I'm proposing a partnership. Your carpentry elevates my designs. We split profits equally. I need a craftsman. You need money. Both of us are carrying grief that's turning us into ghosts. Maybe we build something together instead of just surviving alone. The bluntness shocked him. Nobody mentioned Sarah anymore, tiptoeing around his loss like it was shameful. But this stranger named it directly, matched it with her own. Matthew's objection died. Why me? Because you have talented hands and children who deserve toys. Because I saw how gently you led them away from my window, no anger, no bitterness, just love. Margaret leaned forward. And because I think we both forgot how to make beautiful things. Maybe we can remember together. Matthew looked at his scarred hands. Beautiful things. The wooden horse gathering dust in his shop. Emma's hopeful face. 4 children who hadn't had a real Christmas in 2 years. 3 toys. He heard himself say, "Trial run. If they sell, we continue. If not, I build your shelves and we part ways." Margaret smiled, first genuine warmth he'd seen from her. "Deal. One more condition. Your children come to the workshop after school. They can learn to paint while you build. They'd be in the way. They'd be learning a skill, and I could use the company." Matthew studied her face, seeing past the business proposal to the loneliness underneath. A widow's isolation. He knew that particular emptiness. "All right." He stood, extending his hand. "When do we start through tomorrow morning? Bring your tools and an open mind." Walking home through the snow. Matthew felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not hope exactly. Maybe just the possibility of hope, which was more than he'd felt in 2 years. Emma met him at the door. "Well, we're building toys," Matthew said. "You and your brothers and sister are learning to paint. Starting tomorrow." Her squeal brought the younger ones running. Matthew watched their joy and felt the wooden horse waiting in his workshop like a promise. Maybe someday was finally coming. The first week passed in a blur of sawdust and discovery. Matthew arrived at Margaret's workshop before dawn, his tools wrapped in worn canvas. She had coffee waiting, and designs spread across the table: a mechanical dancing bear, a dollhouse with working shutters, a train with wheels that actually turned. "Can you build this?" Margaret pointed to the bear's internal mechanism. Matthew studied the sketch. Gears, cam shafts, tension springs, complex but elegant. His fingers itched. "Yes, but I'd modify the cam angle here. Smoother motion." Margaret's eyes lit up. "Show me." They worked side by side, her quick mind grasping mechanical principles while his hands translated theory to wood and brass. The bear took shape across 3 days. Matthew's precision, elevating Margaret's whimsy into something extraordinary. When Margaret wound the key, the bear rose on its hind legs and danced. She laughed, actual delight breaking through her widow's composure. "It's perfect," she breathed. "It's ours," Matthew said. Surprising himself, the word felt good. Ours. The children arrived after school, stomping snow from their boots. Margaret had brushes and paints ready, teaching them to mix colors, to apply delicate details to the dollhouse shutters. Thin strokes. "Sarah. Like this. See how the red catches the light." His youngest daughter beamed under Margaret's attention. Emma worked with serious concentration on the train's coal car. James and Thomas painted tiny fence posts for the dollhouse yard, tongues poking out in focus. Matthew shaped wood at his bench, listening to their chatter. Laughter filled the workshop. Actual laughter, the kind he hadn't heard since before he pushed the thought away, focusing on the train's smokestack. But his hands remembered this feeling, creating something not out of necessity, but joy. "Papa, look." James held up a fence post. "Mrs. Sullivan says I have steady hands." "Miss Sullivan," Margaret corrected gently. "And you do. Just like your father." Their eyes met across the workshop. Matthew looked away first, heat climbing his neck. The toys sold the moment Margaret displayed them at the mercantile. 3 sold before noon. Orders placed for 5 more. Margaret brought the money to the workshop that evening, counting out Matthew's half with careful precision. $42, she said. "Your share." Matthew stared at the bills. More than he'd made in 2 months of carpentry work. "That's not right. Your designs." "Equal partners." Margaret's tone allowed no argument. "We agreed." He took the money with shaking hands. Emma's eyes went wide when he showed her that night. "Papa, we can have Christmas." "A little one," Matthew cautioned. But he felt it too, the loosening of the constant vice around his chest. That night, after the children slept, Matthew returned to his cold workshop. The wooden horse waited in the shadows. He picked it up, examining it in the lamplight. 2 years of dust. 2 years of paralysis. His knife found the wood. One cut, then another. The mane taking shape. Rough but alive. He worked for an hour before his hands cramped and stopped. Not finished, but started again. That was something. Through his window. Lamplight glowed in Margaret's shop. He imagined her working late on new designs. The same driven focus he'd seen all week. 2 widows, 2 wounded people, building something from the wreckage of their lives. Matthew cleaned his tools and walked home. The December cold bit deep, but inside his chest, something was thawing. The wooden horse sat on his bench, half finished but no longer abandoned. Its empty eyes waited for completion. For the day, Matthew could see clearly enough to give them sight. 2 weeks before Christmas, the workshop settled into rhythm. Matthew arrived before dawn, Margaret already there with coffee and sketches. They barely needed words anymore. She'd gesture at a design. He'd suggest modifications, and wood became magic under their combined effort. You know what this needs? Margaret held up a music box mechanism. A carousel. Horses that spin when you wind it. Matthew studied the brass gears. I can carve horses small enough, but the mounting. What if we use a central pole, each horse suspended by wire? Wires too visible. Thin dowels, stained dark. Perfect. Her hand brushed his as she reached for the sketch. Both pulled back, awkward. The children arrived at 3, filling the shop with noise and paint-splattered chaos. Margaret taught Sarah to blend colors for a doll's dress. Emma mastered delicate pinstriping on a toy wagon. The boys competed to see who could paint fence posts faster without dripping. Quality over speed, Thomas, Margaret chided, but she was smiling. Matthew watched from his bench, supposedly focused on carousel horse bodies, but really observing how naturally Margaret mothered his children. The gentle correction, the praise for honest effort, the way she tucked Sarah's hair behind her ear without thinking. Sarah's mother had done that. Papa's staring again, James whispered to Thomas, not quietly enough. Am not, Matthew muttered, heat flooding his face. Margaret glanced over, eyebrow raised, amusement playing at her lips. Their eyes held a moment too long before Matthew returned to his carving with unnecessary intensity. That evening, after the children left, Margaret found Matthew at his bench. He hadn't moved in 15 minutes, just standing with a half-carved horse in his hands. Not the carousel horse. The other one. The one that had sat unfinished for 2 years. She didn't ask, just stood beside him in the lamplight. I carved this for James, Matthew said finally. Before Sarah died, before I forgot how to make beautiful things. You're making beautiful things right now. That's different. That's for selling. This... He turned the horse slowly. This was supposed to be from love, pure creation. But after she died, I couldn't finish it. Every time I picked it up, my hands just stopped. Margaret's hand covered his on the workbench, warm and paint-stained and alive. Maybe you just needed someone to build beautiful things with, she said. Maybe you needed to remember it's possible before you could finish something from your heart. Matthew looked at her, really looked, saw past the business partner to the woman underneath. The widow who'd fled Boston to escape memories. The toymaker who poured grief into creation because making something was better than sitting still with loss. Why did you really come here? He asked. To Wyoming. Because in Boston, everywhere I looked, I saw my husband, our life, the future we'd planned. Margaret's voice went soft. I thought if I came somewhere we'd never been together, I could breathe again. Start over without his ghost in every corner. Has it worked? I don't know yet. But for the first time in 3 years, I'm not just surviving. She squeezed his hand. I'm building something. That matters. Matthew's thumb brushed across her knuckles before he realized what he was doing. They both looked at their joined hands, then away. pulling back. I should go, Margaret said. Early start tomorrow. Margaret. She turned at the door. Matthew held up the wooden horse. Thank you for seeing past the broken parts. We're all broken, Matthew. The question is whether we let it destroy us or build something new from the pieces. After she left, Matthew worked on the horse for an hour, the tail taking shape, rough but alive. Progress. But when he tried to carve the eyes, his hands trembled and stopped. Not yet, but closer. He walked home through the December night, Margaret's words circling his mind. For the first time since Sarah died, another woman's voice filled his head. Not replacing his wife, never that, but existing alongside the memories. Warm and present and real. In his pocket, the $42 from their toy sales. Enough for a modest Christmas. Enough to ease the constant terror of poverty. But what loosened in his chest had nothing to do with money. He was beginning to care for Margaret Sullivan, not as a business partner, as something more. The realization terrified him. Grief was safe. Grief was loyal to Sarah's memory. But this feeling, this warmth when Margaret smiled, this awareness of her presence, what did that make him? A betrayer? Or just a man still living Matthew? Didn't know. So he pushed it down, locked it away, and focused on the work. Toys to build, children to feed. That was enough. It had to be enough. Orders flooded in like a December storm. The mercantile wanted 24 toys for Christmas inventory. 3 ranchers' wives pre-ordered custom dollhouses for their daughters. The saloon keeper, surprisingly gentle man with a soft spot for the orphanage, requested a dozen simple wooden animals as donations. We can't possibly make all this, Matthew said, staring at Margaret's order list. We can if we work late, so they did. Matthew stayed past the children's bedtime, past 9 and 10 o'clock, hands moving automatically while exhaustion hazed his vision. Margaret worked across from him, painting details on completed pieces, her face drawn and pale. 4 days into the rush, Matthew missed breakfast with his children, then dinner. He'd come home to find them already asleep. Emma's accusing note on the table, Papa, where are you? Just a few more days, he told himself. Then it eases. But it didn't ease. More orders came. A family wanted a custom train set by Christmas Eve. The doctor's wife requested a music box for her mother. Each order meant income they desperately needed. Each order meant more time away from his children. On the 5th evening, Matthew arrived at Margaret's workshop to find her crying over a broken carousel horse. He'd never seen her cry. It's fine, she said, wiping her eyes roughly. Just tired. I can fix it. Maybe we should refuse some orders. We're killing ourselves. We need the money. Not this much. Not if it costs. Matthew stopped. What was it costing his time with his children? His sleep? Something else he couldn't name. Margaret looked up at him. What's really wrong? Matthew. Nothing. I'm fine. You're lying. You've been distant all week, barely looking at me. What happened? Everything happened. He'd started caring for her. Started feeling things he had no right to feel while Sarah's memory sat fresh in his heart. The guilt was crushing him, and the only way to handle it was distance. Control. Ending this before it became something he couldn't manage. I think we should finish the Christmas orders, Matthew said carefully. Then end the partnership. It's too much. I can't what? Margaret stood. Can't work this hard or can't work with me. Both. Neither. I don't know. Matthew rubbed his face. This was supposed to be temporary. 3 toys. We've done well. Made good money. But my children need me home. He gestured helplessly. I need to go back to regular carpentry. Steady income. Simple work. Simple work, Margaret repeated. or simple feelings. That's not fair. Isn't it? Her voice shook. You've been running from this all week. From me. From what's growing between us. The moment it became real, you pulled away. There's nothing between us. We're business partners. Now you're lying to both of us. Margaret crossed her arms. But fine. If you want to end this, we'll end it. Finish the Christmas orders, and we're done. I'll find another carpenter. Margaret, go home. Matthew, your children need you. So do I. But apparently that doesn't matter. He left without another word, anger and guilt warring in his chest. The cold air bit his face as he walked home, but it couldn't touch the burning shame inside. Emma was waiting up. She took one look at his face and said, "You're doing it again. Papa. Doing what? Disappearing, like after Mama died. You're here, but you're gone. Looking past us instead of at us. I'm trying to make a living. Emma, trying to provide. We don't need toys and nice Christmas." Her voice cracked. "We need you. And you need Miss Sullivan. I see how you look at her. How you smile again when she's near. But you're too scared to let yourself be happy. So you're running away. I'm not. Mama would want you happy. Papa." Tears streaked Emma's face. She'd like Miss Sullivan. She'd want us to be a family again. But you're so busy being loyal to a ghost that you can't see the life right in front of you. The words hit like physical blows. Matthew sank into a chair. "I'm not betraying your mother by caring for Margaret." Emma continued, gentler now. "And neither are you. Loving someone new doesn't erase loving Mama. It just means our hearts are big enough for both." After Emma went to bed, Matthew sat alone in the darkness. His daughter, 12 years old, had more wisdom than he'd managed in 2 years of grief. He'd been so focused on loyalty to Sarah's memory that he'd forgotten Sarah herself. The woman who laughed easily, who believed in second chances, who would never have wanted him to die alongside her. Emma was right. He was disappearing again, choosing the familiar pain of grief over the frightening possibility of joy. Matthew walked to his workshop. The wooden horse sat on the bench, still unfinished. He'd made progress on the body, the tail, the legs, but the eyes remained blank, unseeing. He picked up his smallest carving knife and began to work. Matthew worked through the night. The December cold crept through cracks in the workshop walls, but he barely noticed. His hands moved with certainty now. No trembling, no hesitation. The wooden horse's eyes emerged from the grain one, then the other. He carved the final curves of the mane, sanded every surface smooth, applied the first coat of stain with a brush Sarah had given him 3 Christmases ago. Tears fell while he worked. Good tears. Grief tears. But clean ones. He let himself remember Sarah properly, not the loss, but the love, her laugh, her patience with his rough edges, how she'd wanted him to be happy, to give their children a full life. She wouldn't want this half-existence, this fearful loyalty to her ghost. Dawn light crept through the window. Matthew blinked, realizing he'd worked all night. The wooden horse stood completed on his bench, beautiful and alive and finally finished. Footsteps behind him. All 4 children clustered in the doorway, wrapped in blankets against the cold. Emma held a lamp. They'd found him here, asleep at his bench with the finished horse cradled in his hands. "Papa," James whispered, "you finished it." Matthew looked at his children, truly looked, seeing past his own guilt to their faces. Emma's wisdom, James's steady kindness, Thomas's quick joy, Sarah's gentle heart. They weren't just surviving grief. They were ready for more. "I did," Matthew said. "Finally. It's beautiful." Sarah touched the horse's mane with one careful finger. Mama would love it. She would. "But it's not for Mama." Matthew held it out to James. "It's for you, like I always meant it to be." James took the horse with shaking hands, then burst into tears. Matthew pulled him close, pulled all of them close, and let himself cry too. For Sarah. For the 2 years they'd all spent frozen. For the thawing finally beginning. When the tears stopped, Emma spoke. Papa, you need to go to Miss Sullivan. I know. But I said terrible things yesterday. Pushed her away. So unpush her. Emma smiled. Tell her the truth. That you were scared. That you're not anymore. What if she doesn't want to hear it? She will. She loves you. Papa, anyone can see it. Matthew looked at the wooden horse in James's hands. At his 4 children watching him with hope written clear on their faces. They weren't asking him to forget their mother. They were asking him to live again. To let love back into their broken family. What about you? He asked. If she agreed, how would you feel? Happy, Emma said immediately. The others nodded. Miss Margaret makes you smile like Mama did, James added. That's good, isn't it? Yeah, Papa, Thomas said. It's really good. Little Sarah climbed into his lap. I miss Mama every day, but I like Miss Margaret too. Is that okay? Matthew kissed her forehead. That's more than okay. Sweetheart, that's perfect. Then go, Emma said, before she decides you're hopeless. Matthew stood, suddenly aware he'd been awake all night, covered in sawdust. Probably looked like a wild man. I should clean up first. Papa, go. He went. Margaret's shop was dark, but light showed in the small apartment above it. Matthew climbed the outside stairs and knocked. No answer. He knocked again. The door opened. Margaret stood there in a simple dress, eyes red from crying. They stared at each other. I'm a coward, Matthew said, and a fool, and I'm sorry. Margaret's expression didn't change. Is that all? No? He took a breath. I was scared. Of caring for you. Of betraying Sarah's memory. Of losing someone again. So I ran. Pushed you away before you could matter too much. But Emma's right. I was disappearing again. Choosing familiar grief over frightening joy. And now I'm choosing to be terrified but honest. I care for you. Margaret. More than business partners. More than friends. You make me want to create beautiful things again. You make my children laugh. You make me feel alive. He paused. And yes, that scares me to death. But being without you scares me more. Margaret's eyes filled. You hurt me yesterday. I know. I'm sorry. If I let you close again, will you run the next time you're frightened? I'll try not to, but I'm human and broken and probably will make mistakes. Matthew stepped closer. But I promise I'll come back. I promise I won't disappear. And I promise Sarah's memory doesn't make you less. It makes you more precious, because I know how rare real love is. Margaret wiped her eyes. I was up all night making you something. Even though I was angry. Even though you broke my heart. Want to see it? Yes. She led him inside to her work table. A wooden music box sat there, intricate and beautiful, carved with scenes of a workshop, children painting. 2 figures working side by side. Wind it, Margaret said. Matthew turned the key. The mechanism played a gentle waltz as tiny carved figures danced a man, a woman, 4 children, a family. His hand shook. Margaret, there's a note inside. He lifted the dancing platform. Underneath, careful script on folded paper. Matthew read it twice, vision blurring. Matthew, would you consider making our partnership permanent, not just in business, but in life? I'm asking because I believe we could build something beautiful together, a family, a home, a future. No pressure, just hope. Matthew looked at her. Margaret stood with her arms wrapped around herself, vulnerable and brave. Yes, he whispered, but I want to answer you properly, the way this deserves. My children and I need to make you something. Come to my house tomorrow morning. Christmas morning? Margaret's smile broke like dawn. I'll be there. Matthew kissed her forehead gentle, reverent, promising. Then he went home to his children and told them to gather their paints. They had a message to carve. Christmas Eve morning arrived clear and cold. Matthew's workshop blazed with activity. All 4 children worked with serious concentration while Matthew supervised. Careful with the E, Thomas. Keep the curves smooth. Mine's crooked. Sarah fretted over her S. It's perfect. Emma assured her. Handmade is supposed to look loved, not perfect. They'd worked through the previous day and into the night, each child carving a single letter under Matthew's guidance. Y, E, S. And Matthew was creating the final piece of heart, intricately carved, with both their initials intertwined in the grain. Will she like it, Papa? James asked for the 10th time. She'll love it, because it's from all of us. By dawn Christmas morning, 5 wooden pieces sat on the table. Each letter had been sanded, stained, and painted by the child who carved it. The heart gleamed under final varnish. Everyone ready? Matthew asked. They bundled into coats and walked through the empty Christmas streets to Margaret's apartment. Snow had fallen overnight, muffling the world in white silence. The children's breath steamed in the cold air, but their eyes shone with excitement. Matthew knocked. Margaret opened the door, already dressed, hope and nervousness warring on her face. We brought you something, Emma said. The children arranged themselves on the stairs. Emma held the Y. James held the E. Thomas had the S. Sarah cradled the heart carefully in both hands. Matthew stood behind them, hands on their shoulders, together. They spelled Y-E-S hearts. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled over as she took in the message, not just Matthew's answer, but his children's too. A whole family saying yes to becoming whole again. You really, all of you. She couldn't finish. Mama would like you, James said simply. Papa does too, and so do we. Will you be our new mama? Sarah asked. Our hearts are big enough for both. Margaret knelt on the snowy stairs, gathering Sarah close. Oh, sweetheart, I would be honored, so honored. The other children piled into the embrace. Matthew watched his family, his broken, healing. Brave family choose love over grief, choose life over mere survival. Margaret looked up at him over the children's heads. Is this really happening? If you'll have us, all the rough edges and grief and complications, I'll have you exactly as you are. She stood, keeping one arm around Sarah. But I have conditions. Name them. We keep the workshop, keep building toys together, keep making beautiful things. Done. The children keep painting. They're talented. Absolutely. And you finish that wooden horse. The one you started for James, it deserves to be completed. Matthew smiled. Already done. Gave it to him yesterday morning. Margaret's eyes widened. You finished it. Sometimes you need someone to show you that creating beautiful things is still possible. That love doesn't end when someone dies, it just makes room for more. Matthew stepped closer. You showed me that. You and these 4 miracles who are wiser than their old papa. You're not old, Emma protested. You're just stubborn. Everyone laughed. The sound echoed off the buildings, joyful and alive and absolutely real. Come inside. Margaret said, I have gifts for everyone, and breakfast, and we should talk about, well, everything. Building a life together takes planning. They trooped inside to Margaret's warm apartment. She'd prepared cinnamon rolls and hot chocolate, had wrapped small toys for each child. The morning passed in laughter and planning and the sweet awkwardness of 2 broken families learning to become one. Through the window, the workshop waited. The place where grief had transformed to hope, where 2 widows had found each other in the wreckage, where children had learned that hearts could hold both sorrow and joy without breaking. Matthew watched Margaret teach Sarah a new painting technique. Watched Emma and James argue good-naturedly over toy designs. Watched Thomas steal extra cinnamon rolls when he thought no one was looking. His family. Old and new, broken and healing, perfectly imperfect. And for the first time in 2 years, the future felt possible. Christmas morning sunlight streamed through the workshop windows. Matthew and Margaret worked side by side at the bench, her hand occasionally brushing his as they reached for the same tool. The children painted nearby, their chatter a comfortable background music. 1 week since Christmas. 1 week since they'd become a family and more than just hope. "The Parker order is ready," Margaret said, examining a completed dollhouse. "That's the last of the Christmas rush." "Thank God." Matthew stretched his back. "I'm too old for late nights." "You're not old. You're seasoned." She grinned at him. "Like good wood." "Did you just compare me to lumber, quality lumber, the kind that improves with age?" The children giggled. Emma rolled her eyes. "They're always like this now." "I think it's sweet," Sarah said, mixing blue paint carefully. Matthew looked around the workshop. The wooden horse sat on a shelf of honor near the window finished. Beautiful. No longer a symbol of grief, but of transformation. Beside it, the music box Margaret had made, its tiny figures frozen mid-dance. On the wall, plans for new toys. A wedding gift cradle Margaret had caught him sketching. Future possibilities drawn in careful lines. "What are you thinking?" Margaret asked softly. "That I'm grateful. For second chances. For brave children. For stubborn toy makers who see past broken parts." "I'm the stubborn one." "Absolutely. You refused to let me stay broken. You did that yourself. I just stood nearby with coffee and unreasonable hope." Matthew's hand found hers amid the wood shavings. She laced their fingers together without hesitation. Such a simple gesture, but it meant everything, two people choosing to build something new from grief's wreckage. "Papa, can we go ice skating later?" Thomas asked. "The pond's frozen solid." "If your new mama agrees." The word still felt strange and wonderful on Matthew's tongue. Margaret's eyes brightened every time he said it. "Ice skating sounds perfect." Margaret said, "But Thomas, you're finishing that fence post first. No drips." "Yes, ma'am." "And Emma, that pinstripe work is extraordinary. Have you thought about doing detail painting professionally someday?" Emma beamed. "Really, you think I'm good enough?" "I think you're better than good. I think you have a gift." Matthew watched Margaret nurture his children's talents with the same care she brought to toy making. Gentle corrections, genuine praise, seeing potential and drawing it out. Sarah already called her Mama Margaret. The others would get there in time. Sarah herself was different now. Still his late wife in his heart. Always. But no longer a ghost haunting every corner. More like a warm presence, blessing this new chapter instead of haunting it. "What's the first project after Christmas?" James asked. "Music boxes," Margaret said. "We've had 3 custom orders. Matthew's going to carve the cases. I'll paint the interiors. You lot will handle the detail work." "Can I help with the mechanisms?" James asked hopefully. "Papa's been teaching me about gears." "If your father approves." Matthew nodded. "You've got steady hands and a mechanical mind. Just like..." He stopped, then continued. "Just like your mama." Sarah loved figuring out how things worked. The children's faces softened. They still needed Sarah's name spoken. Her memory kept alive. Margaret understood that, never tried to replace her, just added to the family's story. "She'd be proud of all of you," Matthew continued, "of how brave you've been, how you chose to keep living instead of just surviving. We learned from you, Papa." Emma said, "You finished the horse. You chose Miss Margaret. You showed us it's okay to love again." Margaret squeezed his hand. Through the window, snow fell gently, but inside, the workshop blazed with warmth. The potbelly stove crackled. Paint pots gleamed in rainbow colors. Wood shavings covered the floor like golden snow. "I should start dinner," Margaret said eventually. "Everyone coming to the house tonight." "Wouldn't miss it," Matthew said. They worked another hour, then closed up the shop together. A family routine now, Matthew banking the fire, children cleaning brushes, Margaret covering paints and locking the designs in her desk. As they walked home through the December twilight, Sarah slipped her small hand into Margaret's. "Mama Margaret, will you teach me that special paint technique tomorrow? The one with the tiny flowers?" "Of course, sweetheart. We'll work on it after school." Matthew walked behind them, Emma and the boys flanking him, his family. Whole in a way he'd never expected after Sarah died. Not the same as before, nothing could be, but complete nonetheless, at home. Margaret cooked while the children set the table. Matthew sat at the head of his chair, his house, but now filled with Margaret's warmth, her laughter, her gentle presence making everything new. After dinner, after the children were tucked in bed, Matthew and Margaret sat by the fire. She leaned against his shoulder, her hand in his. "Thank you," Matthew said quietly. "For what? For seeing me. For insisting I could still make beautiful things. For loving my children. For being brave enough to ask for what you wanted. We saved each other," Margaret said. "I was just as broken, just as stuck. You gave me purpose again, a family, a reason to keep creating. Still, I'm grateful." They sat in comfortable silence, watching flames dance. Outside, winter ruled, but inside, in this small frontier house where grief had once reigned supreme, warmth and love prevailed. The wooden horse sat on the mantel now, a gift from Matthew to James that the boy insisted belonged where everyone could see it. A reminder that broken things could be finished, that paralyzed hands could move again, that hearts frozen by grief could thaw and beat and love. Matthew pulled Margaret closer. She sighed contentedly, her head on his chest. "I love you," he said. Simple words, true words. "I love you too," Margaret replied. "All of you. The broken parts and the healing parts and the scared parts and the brave parts. Even the stubborn parts, especially those." Matthew smiled. Through the window, snow continued falling, blanketing the world in white. But inside, firelight painted everything gold, a new beginning built from old grief, a family restored from broken pieces. And in his chest, where a wooden heart had sat frozen for 2 years, warmth bloomed like spring. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer frightening, because he wasn't facing it alone. None of them were. They were family now, and family broken, healing. Imperfect family was the most beautiful thing Matthew Collins had ever created.